Cops mock black woman in court, but when they see her FBI badge, they're shocked. Welcome to our channel, where we unravel the most captivating stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Today, we invite you on a journey filled with drama, suspense, and a powerful lesson about justice. At first glance, you might assume you know precisely where this tale is heading. But rest assured, you'll be caught by surprise again and again. Prepare to witness the unexpected twists that ensnare a dedicated professional woman and a group of cocky officers who underestimated her. Brace yourself for a story that tests loyalty, shatters illusions, and reveals the lengths people will go to protect the truth. Get ready for an unforgettable ride. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Serena Hayes was born in the bustling city of Miami, Florida, where the relentless sun and shimmering coastline offered a constant reminder of life's vibrancy. From a young age, she was fascinated by the complexities of justice, how the law could be both a safeguard and a trap. While classmates gossiped about teenage crushes and homecoming dances, Serena devoured news articles and mystery novels. Her role model was Special Agent Julia Torres, a real-life FBI agent whose takedowns of high-level criminals had been publicized on major networks like CNN. Watching Agent Torres stand in front of the FBI SEAL at press conferences lit a fire in Serena's heart. She knew she wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves. As Serena grew older, her determination only intensified. After high school, she graduated magna cum laude from the University of Florida with a degree in criminology. She then attended the FBI Academy at Quantico. There, she found her passion for deep undercover work and intelligence gathering, thriving in the high-pressure environment. Above all, she learned that sometimes justice came in subtle shades of gray. During her final weeks at Quantico, instructors recognized something special. Serena had a calm, incisive mind, and her empathy allowed her to read people quickly. It was a gift that would make her an asset in the field. Yet as she climbed the ranks, something else climbed with her, a quiet but insidious prejudice from certain individuals who believed her success wasn't earned. She noticed the sideways glances, the muttered comments about diversity hires, and the occasional mocking tone. Yet she pressed on, never letting anyone see her waver. She was determined to prove herself on her own merits, no matter how many obstacles blocked her path. By the time Serena turned 30, she was transferred to the FBI field office in Atlanta. She had envisioned an energetic city with tall skyscrapers, a vibrant music scene, and a storied history of civil rights. What she hadn't anticipated was the stark difference between the progressive pockets of downtown Atlanta and some of the more rural surrounding areas. In more remote counties, she quickly learned, certain local law enforcement officers still clung to archaic beliefs. Among these backward enclaves was a town called Greenpoint, about an hour's drive from the city. It was a small dot on the map where old traditions persisted. The local sheriff's department was notorious for its unprofessional behavior. While not every deputy was problematic, a core group had a reputation for belittling outsiders and turning a blind eye to questionable practices. The FBI had its eye on Greenpoint for months, suspecting corruption and possible civil rights violations. Serena's assignment was initially straightforward. She was to investigate a series of suspicious arrests that disproportionately targeted minority residents. Her role was mostly observational at first, gathering data and building trust with community members who felt intimidated by local law enforcement. But from the day she set foot in Greenpoint, she felt an undercurrent of tension. Residents whispered about missing court documents, sudden firings of decent officers, and even manipulated evidence. The entire place reeked of something dark and stifled. Her FBI colleagues encouraged her to be cautious. But caution was never Serena's strong suit when she sensed injustice. She wanted to see it for herself, to root out the rot in the system, yet nothing could have prepared her for how deeply entrenched the corruption ran and how personal it would all become. Greenpoint's courthouse loomed on the edge of the main street, a neoclassical building that looked out of place in a town of dilapidated storefronts. Its white columns, chipped at the edges, hinted at a long, complex history. The facade suggested dignity, but the reality was anything but. Walking inside, Serena noted the creaking floors and musty smell. She was there incognito at first, posing as a reporter for the local paper. Her plan was to attend a few hearings and gauge the atmosphere. If the rumors were true, if local officers were routinely arresting people under false pretenses, then the court transcripts and testimonies would provide ample evidence. The day's docket was short: a few petty theft cases, a DUI, and one assault charge. The assault case interested her the most, since it involved a young black woman accused of attacking a neighbor. Witnesses claimed the neighbor had threatened her first, but the local sheriff's report told a different story. As Serena took a seat in the back row, she noticed a trio of officers seated together in the front. Their uniforms displayed the emblem of the Greenpoint Sheriff's Department. They were whispering and occasionally snickering. The judge, an older man named Horace Duval, finally stepped in and took his seat. He barely glanced up from his notes. Serena watched as the assault case was called first. The defendant, a frightened woman in her early 20s, was escorted to the stand. Nervously, she explained that her neighbor had harassed her for weeks, yelling racial slurs and intimidating her. Each time she left her home. When she finally pushed him away during a heated altercation, he contacted the sheriff's department, and she was the one charged with assault. Throughout the woman's testimony, Serena noticed the three officers smiling mockingly. One of them, a deputy with a craggy face and a condescending sneer, leaned in to whisper to his colleagues. Serena's stomach turned. It was everything she'd suspected: intimidation and a brazen disregard for justice. But she needed solid evidence. Her hidden audio recorder was capturing every word. After the hearing, Serena headed outside, making sure to linger in the hallway as the officers emerged. She wanted to overhear their conversation, to gather more insight into their mindset. True to form, their loud talk in the corridor revealed casual contempt for the defendant. They called her lazy, troublemaking, and a host of other names. But that wasn't the biggest shock. As Serena eavesdropped, she heard one of them mention that Sheriff Henry Caldwell had big plans for continuing the crackdown on outsiders who didn't fit Greenpoint's mold. Another officer laughed and remarked that they'd keep piling on charges until they learned their lesson. A third one, a tall, brawny man wearing a nameplate that read J. Helms, boasted about forging evidence in previous arrests. Serena's hand clenched around the strap of her purse. Documenting corruption was one thing, but hearing them brag about it so openly made her blood boil. She forced herself to keep her composure. She had more leverage if they continued to let their guard down. As she walked out to her car, she felt eyes burning into her back. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Deputy Helms watching her intently. His gaze shifted to the license plate of her rental car, then back to her face. Though she played it cool, her heart hammered. She realized that infiltration in a small town meant every new face was suspect. She had to tread carefully or risk blowing her cover before she had enough evidence to shut them down. Over the next few weeks, Serena meticulously gathered testimonies from individuals who claimed to have been targeted by the Greenpoint Sheriff's Department. Many of them were minorities, Others were locals who had clashed with the department's favored families. Serena visited a run-down trailer park where two Hispanic brothers recounted being arrested for vagrancy simply because they had nowhere else to go after a fire destroyed their house. She listened to the tearful story of an elderly man who insisted evidence against him for a theft charge had been planted. Everywhere she went, she used her discreet recording devices and took extensive notes. People were initially cautious, but Serena's warmth and empathy eventually won them over. She discovered that the corruption extended beyond law enforcement to influential landowners who struck deals with the sheriff, controlling the local economy with an iron grip. The more she learned, the clearer it became that this was a well-oiled machine, a machine that thrived on fear and silence. Despite the growing stack of documents, Serena knew that taking down an entire network required irrefutable proof. She'd need to involve the FBI's internal attorneys and possibly the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Even that might not be enough if the local judge was compromised. The labyrinth was deeper than she initially suspected, with every new tunnel leading to another unsavory character or story of intimidation. But Serena was never one to shrink from a challenge. Each new piece of evidence galvanized her. She began drafting her official reports, preparing a case that would ultimately shine a spotlight on Greenpoint's corruption. What she didn't expect was that her presence and her relentless inquiries were making her a target. The next set of twists would prove far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Late one evening, Serena's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She debated not answering, assuming it might be a prank call or a telemarketer. Yet an instinct nudged her to pick it up. On the other end was a trembling voice. "Are you the reporter asking about the sheriff's department?" the woman asked. Serena hesitated for a second, but decided to maintain her cover. "Yes, I am. Who is this?" The woman introduced herself as Laura Griffin and insisted they meet immediately. I can't talk over the phone," she stammered. "I think they're listening. Please, meet me at the Waffle House off Highway 10. Any doubt Serena had evaporated as she heard the fear in Laura's voice. Waffle House was a well-known chain throughout the South, and meeting in such a public place would offer some semblance of safety. Serena grabbed her notepad, concealed her FBI badge in an inner pocket of her jacket, and headed out. When she arrived, the place was nearly empty, a few tired truck drivers sipping coffee, a couple of high schoolers munching on hash browns. Laura was sitting at a corner booth, her hands trembling around a paper cup. She was middle-aged, her face lined with worry. At first, Laura flinched at the sight of Serena's business-like attire, but a moment later she relaxed, as if deciding she had no other choice. "I work at the courthouse," Laura whispered. "I handle filing, record-keeping, and sometimes I assist with the judge's administrative tasks. I've seen things, documents being lost, evidence going missing. I've overheard phone calls late at night. Judge Duvall is in on it too. He's getting kickbacks from the sheriff, and they're funneling it through local businesses." Serena's hand froze mid-note. The judge? She had suspected him of bias, but not outright corruption. Laura went on to describe a complex system of bribery and intimidation. She spoke of Sheriff Caldwell as the ringleader, with deputies like Helms and others enforcing his will. As Laura spoke, tears slid down her cheeks. "I want to do the right thing. My conscience is killing me," she said. "But if they find out I've been talking." She didn't finish her sentence, yet the fear in her eyes said enough. Serena thanked Laura and promised to protect her identity. Then, seeing the raw terror in the woman's expression, she decided to reassure her. Leaning in, she quietly told Laura that she wasn't actually a reporter, that she was with the FBI. The revelation made Laura's eyes widen in shock and relief. "FBI," Laura stuttered. "But I promise this isn't going to end with you left in danger," Serena vowed. We'll ensure your safety, but we need to move carefully. Laura clutched at her cup, knuckles white. I'll do anything, just I can't live with myself if this keeps happening. Serena quickly laid out a plan. She advised Laura to continue acting normal at work, to tell no one of their conversation, and to discreetly compile copies of any incriminating records. They exchanged numbers, with Serena instructing her to use a burner phone for contact. Then, Serena slipped out of the diner, scanning the parking lot to ensure no one was watching. That night, back in her motel room, Serena typed up every detail Laura had shared. She uploaded it to a secure FBI server. She felt the weight of the corruption pressing down on her, but also a flicker of hope. Having an insider like Laura could be a game changer. Unknown to Serena, that same night, Deputy Helms parked in a dark sedan across the street from her motel, eyes locked on her window. He quietly lit a cigarette and exhaled, the ember glowing against the darkness. He'd followed her from the Waffle House and had watched her suspiciously. If she was meddling in their affairs, he intended to find out exactly who she was and put a stop to it. The next morning, Serena visited the local library to research more about Greenpoint's recent court cases. Libraries had a surprising wealth of public records, newspapers and archived documents. She found a cozy corner under a flickering fluorescent light, the hum of the air conditioner droning in the background. She combed through old articles, noticing a pattern of arrests that seemed arbitrary. Certain defendants received harsh sentences for minor offenses, while others, connected to prominent families, got away with mere warnings. Halfway through her research, she felt a presence looming behind her. She turned to see Deputy Helms, arms crossed, a tight-lipped smirk on his face. "Fancy meeting you here," he drawled, doing a little reading. Serena forced a polite smile, carefully closing the browser tab, displaying the local courthouse documents. "I'm working on a story about Greenpoint's history," she replied. "Heard it's a town with a lot of character." Helms raised an eyebrow. "History, huh? Guess you could say we got plenty of that. But it's best not to go digging too deep. Might stir up old ghosts." He leaned over her shoulder, eyes scanning the computer screen. Serena tensed, but held her ground. She met his gaze, unwavering. A flash of something curiosity, hostility sparked in his eyes. Finally, he stood upright and tapped the table. "Well, take care," he said. "We like to protect our own around here. Don't want any outsiders stirring trouble. You understand?" Serena nodded curtly. Crystal clear. As Helms exited, his boots echoed on the tiled floor, leaving a palpable tension behind. Serena let out a slow breath. She realized they were onto her, at least partially. The race was on. She had to gather conclusive evidence before they decided she was too big a threat. Her next move was to secure Laura's cooperation in obtaining physical copies of falsified records and possibly recordings of suspicious phone calls. The deeper she ventured, the clearer it became this wasn't just a matter of local injustice. It was a conspiracy that could implode an entire system of power. Serena met with Laura in a discreet location the following evening, a friend's empty garage just outside Greenpoint. The dull glow of a single hanging light illuminated dusty gardening tools and old car parts. Despite the secrecy, Laura's hands still shook with anxiety as she handed over a slim manila folder. "These are just some of the duplicates," Laura whispered. "If they catch me printing these out, I'm done for." Serena flipped through the documents. They included court transcripts that bore discrepancies with what was officially on file, as well as memos suggesting certain evidence was suppressed or altered. The memos referenced code words like petunia and springtime, which Laura believed were coded references to bribes or illegal arrests. "This is great work, Laura," Serena murmured, her eyes scanning the pages. "It's exactly what we need. Keep yourself safe, though. No more until I give you the signal." Laura opened her mouth to protest, but Serena placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We can't risk you getting caught. Once we have everything we need, the FBI will move swiftly. But trust me, if you sense any immediate danger, call me right away. Understand?" Laura nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "Sheriff Caldwell, he's not a good man." "I know," Serena said gently, "but he's going to be held accountable." At that moment, an unexpected noise echoed from outside, a metallic clang, like something hitting a trash can. Serena held a finger to her lips, tension gripping the air. She crept toward a side window, carefully peering out. In the dim light, she thought she saw a figure slip around the corner of the garage. She felt her pulse spike, but when she dashed outside, the alley was empty. It could have been a stray cat, or it could have been someone tailing them. Either way, Serena ushered Laura away quickly, instructing her to take a winding route home. The net was tightening, and she couldn't shake the feeling that every step they took was being watched. The next few days were a blur of high adrenaline. Serena slept little, staying up to cross-reference Laura's files with official records. The deeper she dug, the more her suspicions were confirmed. Sheriff Caldwell and Judge Duvall had orchestrated a profitable racket. They targeted specific defendants, often those least able to afford a lawyer to extract money from fines, bail, or coerced guilty pleas. Underhanded deals took place behind closed doors, with local businesses funneling part of their revenue back to the sheriff's office in exchange for favors. Serena's priority was to finalize a bulletproof case file. She needed enough evidence to convince her FBI superiors and secure warrants. Then they could raid the sheriff's department, the courthouse, and even the judge's private chambers, putting a stop to this cycle of abuse. However, the stress took its toll. She caught herself glancing over her shoulder while grocery shopping, scanning faces in parking lots for Helms or other deputies. Whenever a car followed her for more than a block, she felt the prickle of paranoia. Her instincts told her that Caldwell wouldn't just sit idly by if he suspected an FBI investigation. One night, just as she was about to file her daily report to the bureau, her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "You're in over your head. Leave now." Serena felt her stomach drop, a surge of electric fear coursing through her. She fired off a quick message to her FBI contact in Atlanta, notifying them of the threat. Yet, even as dread washed over her, she steeled herself. She had come too far to abandon the people of Greenpoint to corrupt officials. Her resolve only hardened. She set her phone down, took a deep breath, and resumed typing her report. With each keystroke, she felt a sense of purpose. Fear was an old foe, and she refused to let it paralyze her. This was the moment she'd been preparing for her entire career, the chance to stand up against systemic injustice, no matter the personal cost. Just when the tension seemed almost unbearable, a seemingly unrelated case blew the cover off everything. A young journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Mason Bradley, arrived in Greenpoint to follow up on a suspicious murder case. Locals had found a man shot in broad daylight near the courthouse steps, yet there was no official statement from the sheriff's department. The hush around the incident intrigued Mason, who had a knack for sniffing out big stories. Within hours of Mason's arrival, Serena caught wind of his presence. Worried that he might inadvertently expose her undercover status, she arranged a secret meeting. They connected in a deserted corner of a nearby park. Mason, a lanky man with horn-rimmed glasses, wore a determined but slightly nervous expression. "You're the reporter poking around the sheriff's department, right?" Serena asked. Mason's brow furrowed. "Yes, though I didn't think anyone else was investigating. Serena glanced around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "Listen carefully," she said. "I'm not a reporter. I'm an FBI agent working undercover, and I need to know if what you're doing will compromise my investigation." Mason's eyes widened. "You're FBI, holy. That explains a lot." He quickly explained that he'd been following leads about financial corruption and potential murder for hire rumors swirling around Caldwell's office. The two shared information, and each revelation was more staggering than the last. Mason had discovered that the murder victim was a disgruntled former deputy who allegedly had evidence of Caldwell's illicit dealings. The man had tried to blackmail the sheriff, and days later he turned up dead. Serena's blood ran cold. A murder linked to the sheriff meant the stakes were even higher. She warned Mason of the dangers. If the department realized there was an FBI agent and a journalist snooping around, they'd become more desperate, and desperation could lead to violence. But Mason was resolute. This was the story of a lifetime, and he wasn't backing down. Despite their different roles, they formed an uneasy alliance. The journalist in him wanted to blow the case wide open, while Serena needed secrecy until she could secure arrests. They struck a delicate balance. Mason agreed to hold off on publishing until Serena gave the green light. In return, Serena promised to share enough findings to validate his reporting once the FBI made its move. Meanwhile, tensions simmered in the Greenpoint Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Henry Caldwell, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a domineering presence, sensed the undercurrent of trouble. He paced his office late at night, scanning over financial ledgers that showed the carefully hidden kickbacks. Each time he tried to relax, a new rumor surfaced, a mysterious outsider reporter, more talk of state or federal investigators, silent whispers among the deputies. He called in his closest confidants, Deputy Helms and Captain Oakley, to grill them for answers. Helms mentioned the reporter he'd met at the library, describing her composed demeanor and the look in her eyes that suggested she wasn't just after a fluff piece. Oakley talked about out-of-town license plates and unconfirmed sightings of suspicious vehicles near the courthouse. Caldwell slammed his fist on the desk. "I want to know who these people are," he growled, "and I want it done yesterday. If you can't handle that, you might find yourself out of a job." The two men nodded, though Helms's gaze drifted momentarily. He was haunted by a memory of Serena's unflinching stare. Something about her told him she was more formidable than a small-town journalist, but he kept those thoughts to himself. That same night, Caldwell drove out to Judge Duval's home, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Greenpoint. They sat in a dimly lit study, expensive brandy in cut crystal glasses. Duval's face was etched with worry lines. "If the FBI is involved," Duval muttered, swirling his drink, "we have to shut this down. I can't have them tearing through my court records." Caldwell set his glass down with a clink. "We handle it our way. Someone's squealing, and we'll find out who." In that moment, the judge and sheriff forged a plan that, if successful, would silence their enemies for good. The faint smell of brandy and cigar smoke lingered in the air, a portent of the dangerous days to come. Unaware of the menacing plot being hatched, Serena continued consolidating her evidence. She had enough to prove wrongdoing, but she needed a decisive piece that would tie the judge and sheriff together in a criminal conspiracy. Laura's documents were a breakthrough, but they were partly circumstantial. The FBI needed clear proof of bribes, false charges, and intimidation. Laura informed her that Judge Duval often held private meetings in his office after hours. Sometimes Caldwell joined him. If they could record one of these clandestine sessions, it might be the final nail in the coffin. The problem was that the courthouse was locked tight after business hours, with security cameras monitored by hand-picked deputies. Serena considered her options and decided on a bold plan: break into the courthouse at night and plant a recording device in Duval's office. It was risky. If caught, she'd face immediate arrest, but the potential payoff was too great to ignore. She obtained a set of old blueprints from the county archives, studying the layout for blind spots in the camera coverage. She looped Mason in, explaining that she might need a lookout. While the journalist was understandably nervous, he agreed. They chose a stormy night for the operation, hoping the rain and thunder would keep most people indoors. At exactly 2 a.m., Serena crept around the side of the courthouse. She wore dark clothing and carried a small toolkit. Mason stood at the corner of the street, keeping watch for any patrol vehicles. Thunder rumbled across the sky, and rain battered the stone steps, each drop echoing ominously. Inside, Serena navigated dimly lit corridors, using the blueprint to avoid cameras. Her heart pounded as she slipped a credit card-like tool into the lock of the judge's office door. The mechanism clicked. She entered, guided by a small flashlight. Carefully, she placed a high-tech audio device behind a bookshelf near the judge's massive mahogany desk. Before exiting, she paused, her nerves on edge. She had the sense of being watched. For a split second, she thought she saw a silhouette through the frosted glass door. She froze, holding her breath until she heard distant footsteps retreating. Then she slipped back into the hallway, her footsteps muffled by the storm's roar. With Mason's help, she made it out unseen, her heart hammering. If the device worked, they might finally secure the smoking gun. Little did she know, Caldwell's network was already closing in on her trail. Days passed without incident, and Serena quietly accessed the device's recordings. She listened in her motel room at night, headphones plugged into her laptop. The clarity was good enough to pick up conversations in the judge's office, mundane chatter about scheduling, phone calls with acquaintances. Nothing incriminating at first. Then, late one night, she finally struck gold. Caldwell visited the judge's office. Their conversation started with cryptic references. "We need to handle the problem," Caldwell said. "I'm not letting some wannabe reporter ruin us," the judge murmured agreement. As the conversation continued, they delved deeper, openly discussing how to manipulate future hearings. Duval boasted about having dismissed motions and altered bail conditions to keep certain individuals in jail as leverage. Caldwell bragged about forging evidence against undesirables who might talk too much. Serena listened, her skin crawling. At one point, the judge complained that a big fish higher up might abandon them if this fiasco got out of hand. Caldwell responded that if it came to that, they'd simply get rid of any witnesses. The clarity of their words was unmistakable. They were admitting to felonies, including evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and potential murder. Serena felt a cold knot in her stomach. She had them. This was more than enough to warrant federal charges. She immediately compiled the audio clips into encrypted files, labeling each snippet by timestamp. Then she contacted her supervisor at the Atlanta field office. The plan was set in motion for a coordinated strike. However, she was told it could take a few days for the U.S. attorney to finalize warrants. In those days, Serena had to maintain her cover, acting as though nothing had changed. But tension gripped her. Every day she stayed in Greenpoint was another day she risked exposure. And if Caldwell or Duval got wind that the FBI was ready to pounce, they might preemptively flee or worse, do something drastic to cover their tracks. She prayed the bureaucracy wouldn't drag its feet. Time was running out, and the storm clouds were gathering again. One fateful morning, just as she was preparing to drive out for coffee, two squad cars pulled into the motel parking lot, lights flashing but no sirens. Serena's pulse quickened. She peered through a gap in the curtains, seeing four deputies step out, guns at their hips. Among them was Deputy Helms. Her instincts screamed at her to escape, but her phone vibrated with an incoming call. It was from the Atlanta field office. She answered in a hushed tone. Her supervisor's voice came through, tense. "Warrants are in hand. We're mobilizing in 1 hour." Serena swallowed hard. "They're already here," she whispered. "Stay calm," her supervisor instructed. "We'll send backup ASAP." Seconds later, there was a pounding on her door. Helms's voice echoed, "Open up! We have questions about your activities in town." There was no time to run. If she fled out the window, they'd see her. She had to think fast. She quickly hid her laptop and recording devices in a vent in the bathroom ceiling. Then she placed her official FBI badge in her pocket, carefully tucking it away so it wouldn't be immediately visible. With a deep breath, she opened the door, feigning confusion. "Is there a problem?" she asked, forcing a calm tone. Helms gave her a hard stare. "We have reason to believe you're involved in criminal trespassing at the courthouse. Also, you've been asking a lot of questions." Serena raised her eyebrows in mock surprise. "I'm a freelance journalist. It's my job to ask questions." Another deputy, a stout man named Rourke, stepped forward. "We're taking you in for questioning. Come quietly." Serena considered her options. If she went with them, she might end up in some back room where Caldwell could do anything to her. But if she resisted, she'd blow her cover and possibly spark a shootout. Her best chance was to stall until the FBI strike team arrived. "Fine," she said, lifting her hands in a show of compliance. "Let's go." They marched Serena into the Greenpoint Sheriff's Department, a squat, utilitarian building with buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. Her heart thumped with each step, but she kept her face carefully neutral. Deputies glowered at her, some smirking as though they'd just caught a trophy. Helms led her to a small interrogation room, bare except for a table, 2 chairs, and a flickering overhead bulb. He gestured for her to sit, then stationed himself by the door, arms crossed. Another deputy, Givens, joined him. "So, Miss, what did you say your name was?" Helms asked, flipping open a notebook. "Elizabeth Grace," Serena replied with the alias she'd been using. Helms chuckled. "Elizabeth Grace, the nosy reporter. Let's cut to the chase. We know you've been sticking your nose into official business and trespassing after hours. We've got you on camera. Why don't you save us the time and confess?" Serena feigned indignation. "Is it illegal to look into public records? I'm not aware that your courthouse is off limits." Givens slammed his fist on the table. "Don't play games. We have reason to believe you broke into Judge Duval's office." The interrogation droned on, with the deputies growing more aggressive. Serena offered half answers, twisting her words to appear cooperative while giving away nothing. She occasionally glanced at the clock on the wall, wondering how soon her backup would arrive. After nearly 40 minutes, Sheriff Caldwell entered the room. His piercing gaze bore into Serena, and a cruel grin spread across his face. "Helms, Givens, get out," he ordered. "I need a moment alone with Miss Grace." The deputies obeyed, leaving Serena alone with the man who wielded enormous power in Greenpoint. He closed the door quietly and took a seat across from her. "You know, I run this town," he said softly, tapping a heavy gold ring on the table. "You think you can just waltz in, start rummaging around, and walk away unscathed? You're out of your depth." Serena stared back, her pulse hammering, but her face set like stone. "I'm just doing my job, Sheriff." Caldwell leaned closer, his voice a low hiss. "If you think you're an exception, you're sorely mistaken. People who meddle well, let's just say they often have accidents. I advise you to pack up and disappear if you value your life." His threat was chillingly direct. But Serena refused to cower. She was on the precipice of something monumental. The only question was whether rescue would come before Caldwell decided to end her meddling for good. Suddenly, the blaring of sirens sliced through the tense atmosphere, reverberating through the building. Caldwell shot up from his seat, his eyes narrowing as he tried to discern the source. A deputy burst into the room, face pale. "Sheriff, there's a convoy outside FBI, state troopers, the works." Caldwell's expression flickered with shock, then fury. He turned back to Serena, his mouth twisting. "What did you do?" he growled. Serena rose from her chair, her hand sliding into her pocket. "I tried to warn you, Sheriff. No one's above the law." With that, she pulled out her FBI badge, letting its emblem catch the harsh, fluorescent light. Caldwell's eyes widened, and he lunged forward as if to grab her. But in an instant, the door swung open and armed federal agents poured into the room. They surrounded Caldwell, their weapons drawn. "Henry Caldwell, you're under arrest," one agent announced. "Lower your hands and step away." Outside, chaos erupted in the corridor as more FBI agents secured the station, confiscating files and rounding up deputies. Helms and Givens tried to resist, but they were quickly disarmed. Agents pinned them against the wall, reading them their rights. Serena stepped outside the interrogation room, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and adrenaline. She flashed her badge at stunned onlookers. Some were staff who had no idea she was an agent. Others were detainees who watched in astonishment. Down the hallway, she saw Judge Duvall being led out in handcuffs, sputtering protests about this being a misunderstanding. Agents calmly guided him into an unmarked SUV. The operation unfolded with surgical precision. Within minutes, the seats of power in Greenpoint were toppled, and every deputy suspected of complicity was taken into custody. A wave of disbelief seemed to wash over the entire station. For the first time in years, the malignant control of Caldwell and Duval had been shattered. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the asphalt as the convoy of law enforcement vehicles lined the parking lot. Residents and onlookers gathered behind barricades, watching in stunned silence. Some murmured relief. Others wore expressions of disbelief or even anger. But the prevailing feeling was that a seismic shift had just occurred in their small town. Serena stood by her sedan, letting the day's events sink in. She hardly noticed when an older black man approached with cautious steps. He was soon joined by the young woman who had been unfairly charged with assault, and then a small group of others, whom Serena recognized from her investigative work. They all wore anxious, hopeful looks. A hush fell over them, and one by one they began to clap. It started with the older man, his hands trembling, then spread to the rest of the group. The applause was light at first, then grew in volume as more bystanders joined in. Serena felt heat rise to her cheeks, overwhelmed by the raw emotion of the moment. Her supervisor approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did an outstanding job here, Agent Hayes." She gave a small nod, her throat tight. This was the culmination of her determination, the countless hours spent gathering evidence, the sleepless nights worrying about being discovered. She caught sight of Laura Griffin in the crowd, tears streaming down her face, relief etched in every line. Serena offered a reassuring smile and mouthed, "Thank you," acknowledging that Laura's bravery in providing documents had been instrumental. In the distance, she caught a glimpse of Mason Bradley, the journalist, scribbling furiously in his notepad, likely capturing the most explosive piece of his career. Their eyes met, and he flashed a quick thumbs up. Within the span of an afternoon, an empire of corruption had crumbled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Greenpoint was on the brink of genuine justice. In the days that followed, a special task force combed through every corner of Greenpoint's institutions. Hard drives were seized, secret bank accounts exposed, and depositions taken from dozens of victims and witnesses. Prosecutors wasted no time preparing charges against Sheriff Caldwell, Judge Duvall, and several deputies. Bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and even accessory to murder were on the table. Serena, as the lead field agent on the case, spent hours giving detailed briefings. She also worked closely with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, ensuring the discriminatory nature of Caldwell's arrests was thoroughly addressed. The deeper they dug, the clearer the scope of corruption became. Caldwell had wielded fear like a weapon, punishing anyone who dared challenge his authority. Public sentiment swelled. National media outlets descended on Greenpoint, cameras rolling in front of the courthouse. Interviews with formerly silenced locals painted a heartbreaking picture of abuse. Yet the collective mood was one of hope. The darkness had been dragged into the light, and accountability was finally at hand. Meanwhile, the FBI arranged protective custody for Laura Griffin, who had put herself in grave danger by smuggling out documents. Serena visited her at a secure location, offering updates and reassurance. Laura teared up, thanking Serena repeatedly for standing by her and keeping her safe. With Caldwell and Duvall behind bars awaiting trial, the question remained whether more pieces of the puzzle would fall. Rumors circulated that higher-ups in the state government might have turned a blind eye or even benefited from the scheme. But for now, the crux of the Greenpoint conspiracy had been neutralized. On a personal note, Serena felt a profound sense of vindication. The prejudice she'd endured from certain quarters, the mocking tones about a black woman overreaching in her career, none of that mattered in the face of her accomplishments. She had proven her worth on the grandest stage, defending the defenseless and dismantling a corrupt system. Her resilience had carried her through, and the karmic retribution was now in full swing. Weeks passed, and preparations were made for the trial. Federal prosecutors insisted on holding it in Atlanta to avoid any local bias or intimidation. The date was set, and the once mighty Caldwell and Duvall were transported under heavy guard to the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta. Their appearances were a stark contrast to their former status. Shackled and flanked by marshals, the two men wore the look of cornered predators who had lost their den. Local and national news stations covered the proceedings. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse, capturing the dramatic shift of power. Serena, dressed in a crisp suit, arrived to testify, her FBI badge displayed proudly for the first time in public. Spectators craned their necks to catch a glimpse of this woman who had undone years of corruption. Inside the ornate courtroom, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michelle Bryant led the prosecution. In her opening statement, she laid out the charges with laser precision, weaving a narrative of how Caldwell and Duvall had weaponized the legal system for personal gain. The defense tried to paint the two men as misunderstood public servants, victims of lies and fabrications. But as evidence rolled out transcripts, audio recordings, and witness testimonies, the defense's argument quickly unraveled. Serena took the stand on the third day. She recounted her investigation step by step, explaining how she had gathered proof of falsified documents, coerced confessions, and even bribery. She described, in painstaking detail, the night she broke into Judge Duvall's office to plant the recording device. The court listened, rapt, as she played critical audio clips that captured Caldwell and Duvall incriminating themselves. At one point, the defense tried to rattle her, questioning her methods and implying she had personal biases. But Serena remained calm, explaining that her motive was purely to uphold the law. The jury was visibly moved by her professionalism and courage, particularly as she told stories of the ordinary citizens whose lives had been shattered by Caldwell's tyranny. By the time she stepped down from the stand, an electric hush filled the courtroom. The wave of evidence was overwhelming. All that remained was for the jury to decide whether Caldwell, Duvall, and a handful of other deputies were guilty. But a final twist still lay in wait, one that would ensure the criminals received exactly what was coming to them. The verdict day arrived. Tension saturated the air in the packed courtroom. Journalists jostled for seats, and community members from Greenpoint filled the gallery. On one side, families of the accused anxiously clutched each other's hands. On the other side, the victims, people who had endured wrongful arrests, threats, and humiliation, waited with bated breath. A hush fell as the jury filed in. The foreman stood and cleared his throat. In the case of the United States versus Henry Caldwell, we find the defendant guilty on all counts: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, bribery, and violation of civil rights. The words felt like a collective exhale of relief among the spectators. Caldwell stared forward, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Next, in the case of the United States versus Judge Horace Duvall, we find the defendant guilty on all counts: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, bribery, and violation of civil rights. Duvall's head dropped, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the pronouncement. Gasps and cries echoed through the courtroom. Some families wept openly, while others stared in disbelief. The deputies, who had also been charged, received similar guilty verdicts. The sentencing hearing took place several weeks later. Given the severity of the crimes, organized corruption, abuse of power, and the involvement in violent acts, U.S. District Judge Karen Halstead handed down lengthy prison terms. Caldwell was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, citing the murder charges that were also proven. Duvall received a 40-year sentence, effectively ensuring he'd spend his remaining years behind bars. The deputies were handed sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. The gallery erupted in sobs, cheers, and stunned silence. For many, it was a monumental day, a reckoning. The entire saga had begun with intimidation and ended with justice. Outside, Serena walked down the courthouse steps, flanked by media. Microphones were thrust toward her, and reporters peppered her with questions about her experiences and the significance of the trial. Though she spoke modestly, there was a clear sense of triumph in her voice. A swirl of emotions passed through her: relief that justice was served, pride in having overcome both external corruption and personal challenges, and a solemn realization that not every victim of injustice always sees redemption. But in Greenpoint's case, at least, the dark cloud had finally lifted. When the dust settled, Serena took a leave of absence from the FBI to decompress. She had spent months immersed in tension, deceit, and danger. The burdens of the investigation and her near-constant vigilance weighed heavily. Her superiors supported the decision, encouraging her to recharge before resuming any new assignment. She decided to travel, heading north to Washington, D.C., to visit the Smithsonian museums she'd always loved. The mind-boggling exhibits offered a calm contrast to the chaos she'd recently endured. Each sculpture, painting, or historical relic reminded her that the world was vast and filled with beauty, even in the face of darkness. In the evenings, she mulled over her future. She considered writing a memoir, or at least an article to inspire younger women, particularly women of color, to join law enforcement or the FBI. Her case in Greenpoint had illuminated both the worst and best of what it meant to hold power in one's hands. She found respite in the knowledge that she had not only toppled a corrupt empire, but had upheld the core reason she'd joined the FBI: to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Every news article praising her work was a testament to that mission, although she still maintained that the real heroes were the people who risked everything to stand against tyranny, people like Laura Griffin. On her final day in D.C., she stood before a plaque at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It commemorated trailblazers who had fought for civil rights and justice. The plaque bore names of historical figures who'd paid the ultimate price, as well as those who'd lived to see their efforts rewarded. Serena felt a deep kinship with their struggles, a sense of unity with history's unstoppable tide of progress. By the time she returned to Atlanta, she was reinvigorated, ready to tackle whatever her career had in store next. The ghost of Greenpoint still haunted her dreams sometimes, but she had the satisfaction of knowing that, for once, justice hadn't been merely a theoretical concept, it had arrived in full force. Greenpoint itself underwent a dramatic transformation. With Caldwell and his cronies gone, state authorities appointed an interim sheriff, an officer known for integrity and fairness. Federal grants were allocated to rebuild the town's infrastructure and create new civic programs. Where fear and mistrust once lingered, a cautious optimism began to take root. Local elections brought new leadership to the county commission, many of whom ran on platforms promoting transparency and racial equality. They passed reforms requiring body cameras for all officers, independent oversight of the sheriff's department, and regular community forums where residents could voice concerns. The changes were not instantaneous, and some old prejudices still simmered beneath the surface. But a spark of hope lit the way for a more equitable future. Judge Halstead, who'd presided over Caldwell's trial, became something of a folk hero in the area. People who had been wronged flocked to her court, seeking fair treatment. Meanwhile, attorneys from the state capital offered pro bono services to help those who had been railroaded by the old regime to expunge or appeal their wrongful convictions. The community rallied around the once vilified families, helping them secure jobs and housing. Stores that had gone out of business due to corruption reopened. The local newspaper, once timid and complicit, found a new editor who championed investigative reporting. Even so, the scars ran deep. The memory of Caldwell's tyranny wouldn't vanish overnight. Still, as people visited neighbors of different backgrounds and participated in unity events, it became evident that the stranglehold of fear was loosening. In a sense, Greenpoint's redemption arc mirrored Serena's own trajectory. Both had been weighed down by doubt and outside scorn. Both had faced enormous odds. And both, in the end, emerged stronger for it. One final confrontation awaited Serena, though it was more an emotional coda than a real threat. Months after the trial, she received a letter from Caldwell himself, sent from the maximum security prison where he was serving his sentence. The letter was scrawled in an unsteady hand. He ranted about how he'd been set up, how Serena was just a pawn in a larger conspiracy. He wrote that she was no hero, just another government stooge. The words dripped with bitterness, an echo of a man unwilling to accept the consequences of his actions. Serena stared at the letter, a strange blend of anger and pity washing over her. Caldwell's refusal to acknowledge his guilt only underscored the fact that some people never change, no matter how soundly they've been defeated. She shredded the letter and tossed it in the trash, refusing to let his toxic narrative cling to her spirit. In her mind, the real closure lay in the letters she received from Greenpoint's residents. Kind notes from locals who thanked her for restoring faith in their community. Emails from young girls expressing admiration for a strong black woman who stood her ground. A carefully written card from Laura Griffin, who was starting a new life in another town, free from constant fear. Those messages meant more to Serena than any twisted rant from a disgraced sheriff ever could. As the seasons changed and Serena returned to active duty, she found herself more in demand than ever. Her superiors commended her skill in undercover work, and she was offered a position training new recruits at Quantico on best practices for infiltration and evidence gathering. While teaching had never been her primary ambition, she saw it as an opportunity to shape the next generation of FBI agents, ensuring they embodied the values that had guided her. She also found unexpected celebrity outside the bureau. Various organizations invited her to speak at conferences on civil rights and community policing. She addressed gatherings at universities, sharing stories of courage and resilience. Through these interactions, she realized her case had become a symbolic victory, a beacon of possibility in an era where many people doubted the system's capacity for self-correction. Though part of her missed the adrenaline rush of field operations, she recognized that influence could take many forms. By shaping policy discussions and inspiring future agents, she was striking at the root of injustice, fostering the kind of law enforcement culture that valued empathy as much as efficiency. Still, her badge remained a constant reminder of her oath. In quieter moments, she would hold it in her hand and recall the sneers, the underestimations, the blatant racism she'd faced. She would remember how those arrogant smiles vanished the moment her true identity was revealed in that interrogation room. Karmic retribution, indeed. One of Serena's most memorable speaking engagements took place at the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park in Atlanta. She was invited to address a crowd of local community leaders, church members, and city officials. The air buzzed with anticipation, and as she took the stage, the sight of so many hopeful faces filled her with gratitude. She spoke about her personal journey, touching on the challenges of being a black woman in law enforcement, how some colleagues assumed she'd gotten where she was through quotas or favoritism. She recounted the triumph in Greenpoint as evidence that resilience and truth could topple even the most entrenched corruption. Her words resonated deeply, garnering tears, applause, and standing ovations. Afterwards, an elderly woman approached, leaning on a cane. Her voice trembled with emotion. "You remind me of my granddaughter," she said. "You're doing God's work, child. Thank you for not giving up." Serena's throat tightened. In that moment, all the sacrifices, all the close calls, all the nights of anxiety seemed worth it. She realized that her story was not just about one town's redemption, but about empowering countless people who believed justice was out of their reach. Leaving the park that day, she felt a renewed sense of mission. Greenpoint might have been her biggest victory to date, but it wouldn't be her last. As long as there were injustices to fight, Serena Hayes would be on the front lines, determined to shine a light into the darkness. Occasionally, Serena found herself reminiscing about the most pivotal moment of the Greenpoint saga, the second she pulled out her FBI badge in front of Sheriff Caldwell. She remembered the surreal hush that followed, the raw shock on his face. It was a crystallizing instance, everything she'd worked for, culminating in a thunderbolt of truth. Friends and colleagues teased her, calling it the ultimate mic drop, but she knew there had been more to it than just drama. In that reveal, she shattered the stereotypes that Caldwell and his ilk held on to. Their mockery had stemmed from an assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly hold real authority. Seeing that badge not only proved them wrong, it dismantled the entire house of cards they'd built on prejudice. That memory spurred her on as she dealt with new cases. Whether she was tracking cybercriminals in a digital forensics unit or collaborating with DEA agents on a narcotics bust, she channeled the same grit and conviction. The lesson was clear: never let someone else's narrow expectations define your worth or capabilities. Yet, behind that triumphant memory lay the reality of how close she'd come to danger. If the FBI strike team had been delayed, if Caldwell had been more desperate, or if Helms had pulled his weapon during the interrogation, things could have ended very differently. It was a sobering reminder that justice often walked a thin line, reliant on precise timing and the courage of those who upheld it. Meanwhile, Mason Bradley's article series on the Greenpoint corruption became a sensation. Published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, it offered a blow-by-blow account of the investigation, from Serena's undercover work to the final courtroom showdown. Every detail was meticulously researched, and Mason took care to highlight the personal stories of victims who'd been silenced. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured into community organizations in and around Greenpoint, aimed at assisting those who had suffered. Viewers and readers from across the nation sent letters of support, condemning the systemic abuses and praising Serena's heroism. Mason received multiple journalism awards for his groundbreaking reporting, and he never missed a chance to credit Serena for her courage. For her part, Serena avoided the spotlight beyond her official roles. She saw Mason's success as a testament to collaborative effort. Neither of them could have succeeded alone. Whenever reporters sought an exclusive interview, she politely declined, preferring to let the tangible reforms in Greenpoint speak for themselves. This humility only further cemented her reputation as a rare figure in modern law enforcement, someone who pursued justice without craving personal glory. Still, from time to time, she'd cross paths with Mason at official functions or press gatherings. They'd exchange a knowing smile, remembering the harrowing stakeouts, the whispered conversations, and the perilous decisions that led to one of the most important stings in Georgia's recent history. On the first anniversary of the operation that dismantled Greenpoint's corruption, a group of local activists organized a justice festival in the town square. They reached out to Serena, requesting her presence as a guest of honor. Initially, she hesitated, unsure if it was appropriate to celebrate such a grim chapter of the town's history. But when she learned that many residents wanted to thank her personally, she agreed. The festival was small but joyous. Colorful banners hung from lampposts, local musicians performed on a modest stage, and families strolled through booths selling crafts and homemade food. Among the throngs, Serena spotted faces she recognized. The older black man who once feared speaking out, the Hispanic brothers who'd been wrongly arrested, the elderly man whose theft charge had been fabricated. They all approached her, offering warm smiles and grateful handshakes. The organizers asked her to say a few words. She climbed the temporary stage, feeling an odd blend of nerves and pride. She gazed over the crowd, people of all backgrounds, mingling freely, children playing at their feet. "Change doesn't come from one individual," she began, her voice resonating through the small speaker system. "It comes from the collective will of a community willing to stand up for what's right. I might have played my part, but it was your courage, your tenacity, that truly reshaped Greenpoint." A wave of applause rippled through the audience. Serena took a breath, letting the moment sink in. This was the kind of closure she had rarely experienced in her career, a real, visible transformation, powered not just by legal retribution, but by grassroots healing. As the festival wound down, she walked through the booths, sampling sweet tea and homemade cornbread, exchanging stories with folks who, a year earlier, had been living in fear. There was a sense of renewal in the air, as though the town had collectively decided to write a brighter chapter for itself. When she left Greenpoint that evening, the sun setting behind her, she felt a newfound optimism. Karmic retribution had done more than punish the wicked. It had given the good people of the town a chance to rebuild and thrive. At last, Serena returned to her routine at the Atlanta field office. She took on new assignments and continued to shape young recruits with her experiences. But she carried Greenpoint with her, its lessons, its triumph, its scars. In quieter moments, she'd reflect on how a single case, fueled by a singular determination, could spark massive change, and so her story became legend in law enforcement circles. Whenever a new agent doubted the impact of investigative diligence, they heard about Agent Serena Hayes, who dared to infiltrate a hostile environment and unseat those who thought themselves untouchable. Her example ignited the belief that even the most intimidating challenges could be overcome with strategy, courage, and unwavering resolve. Serena remained humble. She never forgot that every successful mission relied on teamwork, from the whistleblowers who risked their safety to the federal strike teams who arrived at the 11th hour. Her experience proved that the badge on her hip wasn't just an emblem of authority, it was a symbol of responsibility, a duty to shield and serve, no matter the personal cost. Looking back, she realized that the best stories of justice often begin with underestimation. The corrupt see only what they want to see, mocking those they deem powerless. But in their arrogance, they miss the one crucial fact. Truth has a way of finding its champion, and when it does, no force, no prejudice, no threat can stand in its path. Thus concluded the saga of Greenpoint, a small town whose name became synonymous with the downfall of tyranny. Yet for Serena, the journey continued, guiding her toward every new horizon where someone somewhere needed justice, and she was ready to deliver it. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of courage and redemption. From the moment the corrupt officers mocked an unsuspecting stranger to the shocking reveal of her FBI badge, we've witnessed how one person's unwavering commitment to justice can topple entire power structures. Let the story of Greenpoint serve as a reminder that karma is patient but sure, and those who abuse their authority cannot hide forever. If this tale kept you on the edge of your seat, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories. Together, let's spread the message that truth and integrity will always prevail in the end.